Welcome to season 2 of Girl Talk. We are back and better. We've missed you guys so much. I hope you guys have all been keeping well. We have a really exciting season of topics and discussions and real talk coming up for you this season. But let's just reintroduce ourselves for those that don't know us. I'm Danny.
I'm Erica.
I'm Sarah Jane, SJ.
And we have two amazing guests with us tonight. So this is Natalie and we have Michelle as well. So we're going to dive right in.
Yeah.
I think that this topic is one that's I think we're going to run out of
time. I think so.
So Sarah, do you want to just explain to our viewers at home what we're talking about tonight, why you think that this is an important topic to talk about?
So, especially within Christianity, we know that divorce can be somewhat of a taboo subject. And we're going to be talking today about life after divorce. And we have Natalie and Michelle here with us who have very bravely volunteered to share their story, and we're going to just be delving right into their stories. Both Natalie and Michelle, how long were you married for, Misha?
Married for 9 years.
9 years, Natalie? Oh wow, 9 years.
That's not an indication.
Yeah.
I remember they used to call this thing the 7-year itch.
Yeah,
Do you remember the 7-year itch? So I remember thinking as we got closer to the 7-year itch, you were almost thinking we're going to split up. And it's like when things are starting to go wrong, it felt like, okay, who gets over that 7-year period, you know? So it's interesting.
I've had the privilege of being able to kind of just have a really brief conversation with Natalie and Michelle in regard to their stories and how they got to where they are. And I think what we're going to do first of all is just get you guys to share your story with us, how you got here, your key takeaways, and we're just going to have a really open discussion, because the whole point of Girl Talk is to have real discussions about real issues and real topics. And I think for most people, you know, it's not that thing where you go up and be like, so what happened? But I feel like as a sisterhood, there's so many lessons that are missed because we aren't having these open conversations.
Well, it's almost like bereavement, isn't it? No one ever knows what to say, and I'm sure, I guess, you know, people want to come and give you a hug, but it's like, should I come and say something? Is that, again, one of those taboo? But I just want to lay, we would just want to lay a couple of disclaimers before obviously we get into it. We're by no means condoning divorce. We believe that, you know, marriage is supposed to be for life, but stuff happens sometimes that we cannot avoid. So we just want to put that out there to begin with before we get into it.
And I think as well, it's really about raising awareness. Like that's what we really want to do tonight. We want to educate you guys so that for those of you that long to be married, possibly those of you that are in marriages where you're not necessarily 100% happy, we really want to educate you guys tonight so that you can hopefully be equipped with tools how you navigate that, how when issues arise that you can navigate that, or if you're not married yet, the signs to look out for before you get married. So that's really what tonight's about. It's about raising awareness and really starting a discussion and really, you know, gleaning from people that have some wisdom and experience. I think that those are always the best way to learn from people that have journeyed through that. So,
and before we go into the whole story, just to let you know that everybody sitting on this in the studio today have been COVID tested.
Yes.
For those of you that are freaking out right now, they're not a meter apart. We are all negative. We all have negative results, which is why, and every guest that will be coming on here have all had their COVID tests, and they're all negative. So that's why we're able to
sit next to
freely sit next to each other without our masks on today. So we are adhering to social distancing guidelines.
Yes.
Okay, Natalie, do you want to start? Where would you start? Share your story.
I'd probably start at the beginning. So my ex-partner and I knew each other from years ago. So we went to secondary school together.
Oh, wow.
Lost contact. When I started to come to church, I would say probably about 12 years ago. At that time, I was a single mum. We had been together and we'd broken up.
Yourself and your ex-partner?
Yeah. So we'd been together, we'd broken up. We had one child together, and I had a child prior to that relationship. But when I came to church, I came to church carrying a lot of weight. I think the previous relationship that we had hadn't been the best, hadn't been very healthy. And it's almost like stepping into church was a place of, healing and starting a new journey. And then eventually he started to come to church. And so it became a case where in my heart, I wanted my family. I wanted a family. I wanted a family unit. We had a child together. He'd taken on my child as his own. So in my mind's eye, that's what it looked like. So eventually we moved into a place where we decided to make a go of it again. We got engaged, and we planned to be married in the same year that we got engaged, maybe about 6 or 7 months down the line. I think that what I would say is that there were a number of checks throughout the time.
While you were dating?
While we were dating, there were things that became apparent, that just little things, little flashes of things that you would say, actually, had I known then what I know now, I'd have taken stock of.
Would you? Is there any that you feel comfortable to share for those that are single, dating? What do those signs look like? What do they feel like?
Some of them, boundaries, I think, was quite a big one.
Okay.
In terms of people from outside being able to overstep the bounds of the relationship.
Okay. Yeah.
Unforgiveness was a big one as well.
So
in terms of something might happen and it would sit with them, rather than it being that's happened, let's move on. And I guess when you're with somebody and you're dating, what you're seeing is kind of the surface. You're not seeing what that has the potential how that has the potential to impact you moving forward. So fast forward, things started to unravel, just little things here and there, and for myself, I recognise now on reflection that I was trying really hard to hold everything together. So even as things are unraveling, even before we got married, it was almost like I was trying to be a little Holy Spirit Junior, trying to just keep this together and control it together, because in my heart I wanted what I wanted. And about 6 weeks before we were due to get married, there was a conference at Oakington Manor, and there was an altar call, and I can't remember what the altar call was for, but I remember going up, and it was actually Pastor Erica who said to me that if you help a butterfly out of its cocoon, it will die. Its strength comes from its struggle. And I knew what that meant, because like I said, I'd been trying to hold things up, but the order was already out of kilter. The order wasn't in sync. It was supposed to be him leading and me doing what I needed to do. And I knew that in my heart I should have delayed or even cancelled the wedding. And then I started to think about...
And that's a biggie, isn't it? To get that far. And
the
invitation, dress was bought, food was paid for, hotel was done.
I think that's the thing though, that you hear so many people say you have until the moment you walk down the aisle to cancel.
But it's
But
big.
It's a big deal. I think that, you know, obviously I've been married, so everyone's
ours was in a different country, so it'd be like, just enjoy the holiday, guys.
Exactly. And I think that, you know, I think one of the things I recognise is that I will never know whether it was a delay or a no. It could have been an absolute no, or it could have been hold on, I've got work to do. But that's one of my biggest regrets, I think, not listening to the Holy Spirit, who was trying to speak to me in different ways, but because my heart wanted what it wanted, it then took us down to a road that, you know, could have destroyed us both, really, in all honesty. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning of
and sometimes God's no is hard to deal with, you know, but we think, well, I can't deal with that pain of walking away from that relationship, but God is trying to save us from a greater pain that usually comes in and, you know, impacts on children, and we go through unnecessary stuff. I remember years ago having a guest that came in for one of our conferences, and she said she had the cake made, the dress made, invitations had gone out, and I think it was like a week or two before the wedding, and God said to her no. And I guarantee God, he's not just going to tell you the last minute, he's been speaking, but it was like loud enough no she heard, and she did, she listened, and she cancelled it. And I think she met somebody a year later, and they said, "Did you hear?" And she said, "Heard what?" And she, you know, they mentioned the gentleman's name, and she said, "No, I've not heard from him since I called it off. We've not been in touch." And they said, "Well, he's actually dead. He had full-blown AIDS, and God was saving her life, literally." And that's where we've got to realise that God's intent for us is always for good, if we'll allow him to protect us.
And I think that's where it's God's will versus our will, because I think that especially as women, we paint a picture of what we want our life to look like. We put these invisible deadlines on when things should happen. You know, we're supposed to be married by 25, have 3 children by 30, you know, have the house by 35, you know, and you've got all your whole life mapped out. And I think we're all pretty guilty of it, you know. And I think when things don't happen in that time frame, a lot of the times we want to hurry God along. And I think that's really for me where I would want people to really take what's being said tonight as serious, because when you enter into a marriage, when you enter into a covenant, you're not just, it's not a plaything.
It's not life.
This is life. This is destiny. This is not just about you. There's when you marry somebody, you take on their family. You know, there's so many elements to a marriage, and I think, you know, that's the goal, that if we can prevent somebody from making the wrong decision or acting out of haste, or just like in Natalie's case, do your due diligence. And what might be a later on, just by you allowing God to do what he needs to do in that person, it could just be the wrong timing. But it's really, I think,
but sometimes important. We can mess it up, whatever God wanted to do, because like the cocoon, the metamorphosis, right, we didn't allow the process.
So I've got a question for you, Natalie. So obviously you said you're getting all these checks, but was it, you know, was it always like this uncomfortableness, or were there, you know, did it start off good and then start to disintegrate, or was it kind of tough from the beginning? Were there moments or seasons of it being wonderful, blissful?
The 9 years was a battle.
Oh wow, the whole 9 years.
Literally. I would say we didn't really get to maybe 6 months without there being some major issue, difficulty, and I think it comes back to, you both have to be really ready. There's got to have to be aspect of our character, and I, you know, I've reflected a lot, and there was aspects of my character that was underdeveloped. That needed to be developed in order to be prepared to deal with some of the things that came my way. And likewise for him. there were aspects of his character that needed development before we took the step and said we're actually ready to walk that road. And I think that for every wrong that was done, what I would say is that your response can be as equally damaging to the relationship as the wrong that has been done. And I think that was something that was quite evident in
really
our
powerful.
situation.
That's really powerful because
say that again.
For every wrong that has been done, your reaction or your response to that can be as equally as damaging. Because
really
I know
good.
I may not have done the things that he had done, but I know my tongue can cut. You know, and sometimes when you're coming from a place of pain, you will say things because you've done this to me and I'm hurting. So I want to hurt you back, but I can't do what you did to hurt you because I'm not going to do that. But what I can do is tear you down.
Tell you about yourself.
And honestly, that back and forth, and so nobody wins. Nobody wins. You're just constantly in that cycle of you know, retaliation and confrontation and so on, and it's unhealthy.
And obviously in the midst of all of this you had 3 children. How did that have an effect, and walk us through that, what that was looked like for your children and for your household?
In the situation, I know a lot of people say, you know, think of the children if you're thinking about, you know, separating and so on, but it was really unhealthy. As much as you try to shield your children from what's happening, sometimes if you're that conflicted, it's impossible. And what you have to remember is that you're demonstrating to your children what marriage and what relationships is all about. And if you cannot even, you know, conduct yourself, because in all of this we were Christians. You know, we weren't in the world like we were before. We were Christians, and at times you would not have thought, being honest, that either of us were in that place where you know, and so this is what we were demonstrating to our kids. So it took a lot after to really minister to the kids and really make sure that they were okay, because they experienced as much as we had experienced.
And I think that's what a lot of people don't realise, that divorce actually affects infidelity, affects the children just as much as it affects the spouses, and I don't think a lot of people realise that. So let's fast forward to maybe year 8, where by now I think you're probably feeling like this is not gonna go the long haul. What was it? What was the
Catalyst.
what was the breaking point? Because you've lasted now 8 years. Is that all right?
Yeah. So I would say I lasted that long because at times, because I knew that I had at the beginning disobeyed the word that had come to me, it almost felt like a condemnation. Like, this is your lot. You made this choice. You know you made the choice. You know you did what you did. This is your lot. And it got to a stage where I had no peace. Like, you know, to live that long
must have been hard,
with no
right?
peace, that is, you know,
every day you're getting up every day,
and it's just like you don't know what to expect, and even when things are going well, you are anticipating something going wrong.
Well, there's a part of you, I would imagine, that says, "Oh, what's the point of trying? What's the point of giving my best? Because it's already." I've already stepped out, and I know I made a wrong decision. So what's the point of me putting in the effort?
Exactly.
You know.
And I think I got to a stage where I think it was year 8, actually, where I started Bible school, and that started. I'm telling you honestly, that started to do some things in me. That started to get me to, you know, release certain aspects. Really be measured about what I wanted, and really talk to God, like, what is this? Where are we going with this? Like, we're in year 8 heading to year 9 and we're still going through the same things. Nothing's changing. With, you know, saying counselling, doesn't want to go counselling, you know, so many different things that we could do that it just wasn't going right. And the catalyst for me was that I had a dream. And in the dream, basically, I came to some harm, and it was really vivid vivid dream, and it woke me out my sleep, and I was scared. And then I had the dream a second time, and then I approached my ex-husband and I spoke to him. I said, look, this is the dream, and I won't say the dream because it's not about trying to expose and embarrass him or anything like that. But we spoke about it, and what God had shown me again was what was essentially true. It was true. And so I didn't get I didn't get angry. I didn't get upset. And I took a few weeks and I processed it, and then I went before God and I said, what else? What else do I have to accept? What else do I have to forgive? What else has to happen before I can let go? And it was only at that point that I had a peace about me that I hadn't had in a long time, that allowed me to just release it and let go. Because I've been fighting. I didn't want, the one thing I did not want was to be divorced. That was just never something. Yes, there were times where you just I've had enough. You know, I'm going to walk away. But in my heart of heart, truly, that wasn't what I wanted to do. But it was myself. I actually filed for the divorce. But even in that, I didn't do it immediately because I wanted to make sure this time that what I was doing was what I was supposed to be doing. And so I waited about another 4 or 5 months, and a few other things became apparent, and then it was just confirmation after confirmation, and that's where I just let it go.
And your marriage, obviously, one of the factors in your marriage, if you don't mind me saying, was obviously there was infidelity. So according to biblical standards, you had a right to leave. So you had a right to exit the marriage quite. You got given a pass from quite early, but you chose to stay. And you know, I remember being a teenager, and you know, we'd all say, you know, my husband ever, like if he ever, you know, we do the neck, and you know, you better know, better recognise. And every once in a while, I do say that to my husband, you know, just give out the warning. But in essence, the reality is, you know, we do that, but it's very different when you're faced with that reality, and you know, you've got children and you are invested in this or whatever. So do you mind me asking, why stay? Like, not once, not twice, but why? Because you had a legal, like, spiritual right to go, but you chose to stay. And I personally have a lot of respect for women or men that make that decision, because it's not an easy one to make, because you have a right to go, and I think everyone and your mum would be like, go, you know, like,
and that's literally the reality. I think even, you know, when things became apparent, I would pray about it, and actually sometimes what I would hear is stay. I wouldn't understand why, you know, because for me I'm just like, it's just enough. Like, what else, you know? But that's what I heard, and it was to stay. And so, having not followed the word before, you know, everybody has the opportunity to change. There's nobody beyond redemption. There's nobody beyond change. But it takes two. It really, really, marriage is hard enough.
And it's complicated as well. It's not like, okay, I guess if you were both, there was no children involved, it would be, it was never easy, but it would be easier. But it's like trying to undo all of these intricacies. It's not a simple process.
No, not at all.
And yes, you know, when you're single and you can say, well, if that was me, I wouldn't put up with that. And, you know, people do that from lack of experience. But when you're actually have feelings for somebody, you know, okay, they've done you wrong, but you actually have feelings. Your feelings, your heart, they've got a part of your heart. Regardless of what they've done to you, they've still got a part of your heart. So you're invested in them. So it's not that, okay, you know, you've done this, I'm gone. You've got to undo all of that. You know?
And you have to be prepared to, you know, it doesn't just mean around infidelity or anything. We always forgive, you know, we all get it wrong sometimes. You know, in very little things, and you know, there's no big sin or little sin. You know, so we can say the wrong thing and expect to be forgiven, or you can, you know, you can act out in the wrong way and expect to be forgiven. And I guess that was no different in that situation. It was hard. It was really, really hard, but again, that was my choice that I made because I wanted it to work. At no point do I think I ever went into this marriage thinking that I would end up divorced.
How do you feel about you now?
I feel better. It's been a process, a steep learning curve. I think I learned a lot about myself in terms of how I navigate things. You know, I'm always trying to just literally, you know, trying to hold things together, and actually I had to learn not to rely on myself. So, you know, being a single parent again, you know, having to take care of, you know, not that having to take care of finances, because I knew about finances, but having to be the only financial, you know, the breadwinner, essentially, you know, when there were struggles when you had two incomes, then it's about navigating that, and literally it was only a reliance on God. I know that had He not come through for me, I learnt so many different characters of God in that you know, it's held me. He really did hold me, because I don't think I would have been able to stand without him.
So there's a compassion that's, you know, it's not just in a situation like that, but whatever we go through, there is a humbling of ourselves. There is a compassion that's birthed from it, where we, you know, come down from that high horse. Absolutely. Oh, I wouldn't put up with that. To now, it's like I can empathise. I can relate to where you are and what you've been through, and it's that rebuilding process, isn't it?
And I purposed myself, because I hadn't made the decision in anger. I purposed myself that I didn't want to come out bitter.
That's good.
I didn't want to come out bitter.
Good.
I wanted to come out better than I was.
Better person.
Absolutely. I didn't want to be angry. I didn't want that. You know, I'd spent a long time being angry. I'd spent a long time being hurt. I'd spent a long time in pain. I needed to just be at peace. And that's the one thing in my heart that I truly said to God, look, just whatever you have to do, that's all I want, just peace. And that's been the most valuable thing.
And I think one of the important things as well is you're still an individual. You know, yes, you meet a person along the way, you become joined with them, but you're still an individual. And I think, you know, to those that are listening, it's not to lose your identity, but to recognize that you're still an individual. And it may mean that you have to pick up the pieces, but start rebuilding yourself again. Don't sit down and think, well, my life's over. No, it's not.
It's not final.
No, it's not. Absolutely not. So I just want to encourage you, if that's your story, if that's your journey, you know, you can email us and we'd love to reach out to you, but it's not the end of your story. You began with you, and you're going to end with you, and it's just to put those pieces back together again and find your path.
So some people could argue that yours really was beyond your control, in the sense of, you know, you really had a reason to go, and biblically, you know, you stayed within scripture, and, you know, obviously you'd be free to marry. Yours, Misha, was slightly different. So you've said to me that you chose to end the marriage. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your story?
So I met my ex-husband a year before I got married. So we met in church.
So you knew each other from beginning to end for 12 months before you got married?
So we were engaged. I had kind of left church for a little bit, and then I had come back and rededicated my life to God. And at that point, he had joined the church in the time that I was absent. So when I came back, somebody said, oh, you need to meet pastor's daughter. She's just come back to church. And I wasn't thinking about boyfriends or anything like that. So it was built on friendship at first, and then within 6 months we were engaged.
Wow, that was quick.
It was very quick. And then 6 months later, after that, we were married.
Wow.
So it was very quick, the way everything progressed. There, like Natalie said, I did see or get checks during the dating process.
Do you know what some of those were?
Some of those were things like control, possessiveness, insecurities. I was also coming from a broken place,
So you hadn't had that time to heal within
yourself. I didn't have that time to heal.
Yeah.
And I had come back to God wanting to, just go through that healing process, because there was a lot that I had been through, being in the world and then coming back to God. And so I needed that time to really focus on my relationship.
Did you realise you needed that time though?
I realised that after.
Yeah.
I was going to say.
Hindsight.
Yeah, maybe, because it would be like, go away, come back in a year's time.
Yes, and that's what I should have done. And so it was kind of like this whirlwind. Within a year of coming back into church, I'm married. It was never something that I was thinking about. Marriage wasn't at the forefront of my mind. It was kind of like trying to figure out who I was still. So I got married, and I find myself in this position of like, what have I done?
Because after marriage,
that must be quite scary.
After we got married,
literally.
But I
remember leading up to your wedding though. It's like you were not even trying to plan a wedding.
No,
which was really weird because obviously as parents, you don't want to take over, and I didn't want to be that mother that just like takes over, pushes you to one side and organises your wedding. So I left you the room to do your planning. And I remember, I think it was
pretty much planned everything.
But it was literally, I think it was like 3 months before the wedding, and I came and I met with her, and I said, "Where are you up to? What plans have you made?" And she told me nothing. I was like, "No,
that was probably down to the fact that your heart really
wasn't there.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
And I remember the day of the wedding, Mum was helping me to get my dress on, and she looked at me and she said, "You don't seem very happy for someone who's about to get married." And I kind of at that point wanted to say I don't. But I thought of all the money that had been spent, all the people who'd been invited, and I didn't want to embarrass my parents. So I didn't say anything. I just said, "I'm fine," and progressed. And I do remember crying on that night.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
crying because you felt I've made a big mistake.
Yeah.
Wow. So I think that the thing that's standing out to me, it's just giving me like goosebumps, is that both of you are saying that those checks were there. And I think that we can't underestimate those checks. And I even remember when I was engaged before Jason, and I remember feeling like I could just date him forever. And now I know that that's a really bad thing to be okay with. And what I now looking back in hindsight, the reason for like I felt like I could just date him or be engaged forever, I never felt the need to hurry up and get married. The only reason why I would have got married is because of the church and you can't date forever, was because in my spirit I knew that this wasn't my person. So I think that you do know, and I think that if you don't want to automatically start your life with somebody and that thing's not pushing you from either side, I think that that's a huge check and something that we all need to pay
I think one of the
to.
things that I asked before I got married, and I used to ask this to all married couples, is how do you know? Because I was like, I don't want to be that person that I'm like, wake up next to you and I'm like, oh no, what did I do? But I wanted to be like 1,000,000% sure that this is God's perfect will. Like for me, I always look long term. I'm always like 50 years down the line because it's the dating, the fun stuff, the holidays, they're great stuff, but it's the everyday, even during lockdown where you're in each other's space all the time, it's those moments that you have to be good with each other. And no one could really give me an answer as to how but the only way that I can describe it is that you have the most perfect
But who are you
peace.
asking?
No, I would ask loads of different married
Single,
people.
married people.
Because I was like, what is it is it like God speaks to you and says, yes, this is your person?
It's a peace.
It is like
For those that are
that
are wanting to know what is it, it's a peace.
It's the most perfect.
It's a peace
and
that you
that's
have.
the
That's
thing.
It's just like it just sits right. It fits right. And I just want to say this. The Word of God and the checks that we get in our spirits are like guardrails.
Yeah.
If you've ever gone to bowling, if you've ever done bowling, usually when children are bowling, there's these guardrails. Or some adults. There's these things called guardrails, and they come up either side of that lane. So it doesn't matter how that ball that may roll, it doesn't ever come off track because the guardrails keeps it going in the right direction. And when we get those checks, and when we go contrary to the word of God, it's like we remove the guardrails. And I know most times, for people who don't know how to bowl, without the guardrails, your ball's going in the ditch. And that's what happens with life. Just because we don't understand what that's going to look like if we override, and God's never going to force you. He's given us free will. So even if it's against the will of God concerning your life, being with that person, God won't stop you. He won't force you.
That's right, because it's your choice. God gives you the freedom to. He gives you the warning.
He'll speak to you.
He'll speak to you. He'll even use other people to speak to you.
Did that happen to you?
Yes. I had one person come up to me and said to me, "You need to postpone it."
Oh wow!
And because they were young, they were younger than me, and I was just like, "Oh, they don't know what they're talking about." I disregarded that, and that was another check, which I ignored. So had I listened, I probably would have found someone that I could have still been married to today.
So let's go to the night. You're there. You're crying.
What does he do?
Wait, hold on. Are you in the bathroom? Just taking a bit longer to have a shower? Is it like a dirty cry where you're just sitting there, not knowing what to do, just sitting there like, oh my gosh, like what's just because I'm very visual, so let's get to that bit. So are you quietly just in the bathroom? Because I cried when I got married because I was like I want my family,
what was you were leaving?
Yeah, but I'm saying that, for me, it was like, okay, right, we're married now, let's go and meet everyone for breakfast. It was, let's get back to me, because I'm very much a connector of people, but I wasn't crying because I was like, oh, this is the wrong person. It was more like, oh, I wish that everyone could just live with me at the same time. But yours is a different cry, so let's get to that one.
So it was obviously at the end of a very long day, and we were in bed getting ready to go to sleep, and he noticed that I was crying quietly, and he asked, "What's wrong? Why are you crying? Is it me?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm just, crying tears of joy."
Oh dear.
I didn't want to break his heart. I didn't want to hurt his feelings.
Yeah, I get that.
Probably he's at his happiest. Just married.
To want to play
Like shatter his ego.
It's like day one. It's not even it's not even 24 hours. So, and I knew it's done. I have a choice and a decision to make today, and that's to just get on with it. And so that's what I did. I tried my hardest to make it work, to make it right. It was a struggle every day to show respect, to show, and that was one of the things that several people pointed out that you need to respect him a bit more because I think I was living in a place of regret, and I wish
So it turns to resentment.
I could have, it turns to resentment, which can then play out in hurtful words. But along the way, over the years, some of those checks that I had and things that I had seen prior to marriage started to play out even more, which was his insecurities and his possessiveness, and it became quite controlling. I couldn't go and run errands on a Saturday without him needing to know exactly where I was at what time. So that was difficult to live with, and that kind of got worse towards the end of the relationship. There were several other factors. Selfishness on both parts was a big factor. I didn't necessarily respect his culture, which was obviously very hurtful for him and disrespectful, because I refused to embrace it, and I should have known that before I walked into it, that that's not what I wanted. So I should have really made that a consideration, that this is something I have to embrace.
So I'm going to ask you what I asked Natalie. So now we're in year 8, because you said 9 years as well.
Yeah.
You know, even though yours, not to diminish like Natalie's was worse or yours is not as bad, but obviously the issues that you've raised, you maybe could have worked through. Do you think?
I think I could have done.
So what was it that stopped you going, do you know what, let's just buckle down, let's get counselling, let's just go for this? Because by now you've also got a child, right? So you had Aiden. Let's take us to year 8, because I feel like that would have been like, you know, when you're riding a bike and you get to the downhill bit, that's where you know it gets a bit scary, because you lose a bit of control. So you know, you're probably really fed up by now. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but talk us through what that looked like. How did you get to the point? Because I've been married for 10 years, 10 years.
She's
10 years this year. And you know, obviously it's interesting, I think, for people that are married, is because, you know, familiarity does set in, you know, life happens, you know, every day's not Christmas. So, you know, what are some of those signs for us that are married, or those that are single and going to be married? What are the warning signs where, okay, this isn't just a disagreement, this isn't just you irritating me and getting on my last nerve, this is serious? How do you what were those signs that led to the divorce part, where you knew this is done, we're done?
So, as I said before, there was a lot of selfishness on both parts, and neither of us was kind of willing to change to accommodate the other. And I think that there was lots of silences, which would go on for weeks, where you just mourning, and that's about as much as you say to each other in a day. We didn't communicate throughout the day, and it was that can just continue to snowball.
Almost like roommates.
Sorry, can I just...
We were complete roommates.
Can I just ask though, so you're not talking, right? Get home, have your dinners.
But
you've got one
Would you make
bedroom.
dinner?
But you've got one room, right? Because you share a room. This is what I think is the most awkward. You know, when you get married, you share a room. So if you're not speaking, is it just a stiff to the left and the right?
It's
and
the north
hug
and
the
south.
So you just
North
literally
and south. You got each other's backs.
over one side.
So what was happening is we would be going to bed at different times. So I would probably go to bed first.
So you're asleep.
So you'd avoid each other.
So yes, we would avoid each other.
Right.
So
That's hard, isn't it?
It's very hard.
That's really hard to live
And
with
obviously
that.
we've got Aidan, who is in the middle of us, who we're trying to parent and show him happiness and be playful with him. But then as soon as he's gone to bed, it's like north and south.
Okay. So it's like a pretense in
Yes,
front of
very
him.
much. It's a pretense in front of everyone, in front of
Okay.
family.
Yeah,
in
because
front of
I
everyone.
remember, your ex-husband, he'd laugh, like, you know, we'd catch jokes, and you know, it was cool.
But I
As
think
far
in-
as we were concerned,
But I
from the
think in all of
outside.
that, do you not start to desensitize yourself to the? You almost can get used to the silence, I would imagine, because if this is the way that you're living day in and day out, I suppose in the midst of all of that, resentment is very much present.
Yeah.
I think as well that the most disrespectful thing that you can do to each other as a marital couple is to give each other the silent treatment. What you're communicating to your spouse is that you're not worth enough to even.
But you're not thinking that
acknowledge.
way.
No,
It's-
but I'm just
But
saying.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying
no.
this to some. I'm saying this to all of us now. That it's one of the most damaging things, because what you're
It is.
communicating
It's
in
extremely
that
damaging.
action
Yeah.
is that I place such little value on you that I don't even value you enough to talk to you.
Well, I think there's so much pain.
That's the highest level.
But there's so
of
much
disregard.
pain that's going on there. That
No, but I think but what I'm saying is at the beginning because we learn behaviors,
Yeah.
and it would have started with, it starts with, you know, you don't speak for half a day, then it goes to a full day,
Yeah.
and then it goes to 2 days, and then it goes to 3 days, and then it goes to a few weeks. And what would have been uncomfortable, and I think that we need to be careful as spouses that we don't train each other, because everything is training. You
Yeah,
said that the other day,
Yes,
Danny.
learned
It's
behaviour.
no, but you're training
Yeah.
your relationship. You're training each other whether to trust each other. You're training each other, and you can train someone not to need you anymore.
Yeah.
That's the
But
reality.
but the reality is people are not thinking that way.
Not
We're
in
not
the
thinking,
moment.
okay, I'm training my spouse not to hear my voice, not to, and we don't realise, because we're in this mess. It's this,
Enough feelings.
there's hurts
Yeah.
and there's all kinds of stuff going on, and we are having conversations, but we're just having them with
Necessary.
ourselves.
That's right.
No, but we're talking to ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, I think every married person can relate. When there is an argument or there's a disagreement and there's that little breach in the relationship, we continue conversations.
Yeah.
It's just in our head.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is true.
And one of the things I used to do was frantically clean. So you'd hear the cupboard doors banging because I am having that internal conversation with the things that I should have said to him is the things that I'm taking my frustrations out on, you know, the kitchen work surfaces.
But can I just say those conversations are actually really dangerous,
They are.
because we're actually, when we process things in our head, we're not processing them right. And so when we're having those conversations in our head, they're based on what's going on inside of us. And we're talking to ourselves, and we're talking on behalf of that person, and there's no one to check that conversation. And we oftentimes are reading more into the situation than there is. When you are at that point, you really do need to go and get serious counselling, get help before it goes any further. We need to learn to, because you may think, well, it's not that serious at the moment. You need to nip those things in the bud and learn to manage that situation in a positive way.
But I think before though that you go to get counselling, there has to be a willingness from both parties.
Absolutely.
I think that's the fundamental thing in a marriage. It requires two people. It can't be one person is fighting, flying the flag for this marriage to succeed. A marriage ultimately requires two willing parties.
And I think that's it. You
Yeah.
can have someone that's completely willing, completely committed to a marriage, but if somebody keeps on pushing and breaking and shutting someone down, I think that the most dangerous thing is when you stop having those conversations where actually I don't feel anything anymore. I don't actually care. Do what you want. I think that when you, I think that for me is the most dangerous place where I actually don't care anymore. I don't have any conversation happening.
Most people reach that point at some if those checks are not reined in, if those things are not reined in. So you were taking it out on the kitchen cupboards and
the vacuum cleaner.
and like you said, I had eventually got to that point where I didn't care anymore, and it was a case of I don't care if you leave. You can go.
So did he want to stay in all of this? Was he willing to fight for the marriage, or was it a mutual?
He was fighting for it.
Okay.
He was the one who was pursuing counselling, but I was already at that point
gone.
done. I was gone.
You were gone.
And
but you went with them, obviously. You had counselling.
we had counselling. But to me, I was already shut off. I was present, but I wasn't.
Your heart wasn't
willing.
open.
I wasn't willing to change. I was, because I had already checked out. And I think the final straw for me, which was probably the penultimate decision, was I had. So when we separated, it was like April or March, and in February, the month prior, I had had an ectopic pregnancy, and I'd fainted at work and ended up in hospital. And I'd been in hospital for about 3 or 4 days, and at the time it was obviously February, it's snowed quite heavy, and I had called him to say, could you come and collect me? Obviously still very much in pain, and he said, can't you just walk? And I said, that's it, I'm done. Because you're selfish.
Yeah.
And that was it.
And did you have to walk home?
No, I called somebody and said to him, and I called someone and asked them to have a word with him, because I didn't have anything on me. I was from work into hospital. He had my bag, he had my keys, my purse, everything. So how was I going to walk home in heavy snow and still
and just
having
had surgery?
Yeah, so I was just distraught, and that was the point where I made that decision to say enough is enough.
Do you have any regrets?
I regret not trying harder. I regret not trying for Aidan's sake, because he's now 12 years without a father in his life. So for me, it's more about him, and you know, not giving him siblings. That's my regret.
And you, Natalie?
Me, I think, I think the warnings were there. I think if I'd known then what I know now, the level of pain that I went through, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So I would definitely have taken stock at the beginning, and like I said, delay is not denial. But that's one of my regrets, that I will never know what it was meant to be, what it could have been. That's one of my biggest regrets, and it's something, you know, I have to live with, I guess.
And
would you have done it again? Would you have married that same individual again?
I don't, you know, that's really difficult, because they, you know, when things were good, when we got along for the brief moment, we got along really, really well. You know, we could sit down, we could have a laugh, we could have a conversation, you know, but had it been maybe later on down the line, probably. But there was so, I think we both were quite broken in different ways. Two broken people together, unless that's been dealt with beforehand, it's a recipe for disaster.
And I know we're running out of time, but what advice can you give to anyone that is in a similar situation? They now find themselves on their own. What advice
both
would you?
of you are raising children, aren't you?
What advice would you give to how to get back up, how to carry on with life again?
I think for me, God has been
a little bit for me.
God's been essential. I think that I honestly do not think that I would be still standing today if it wasn't for where my faith was. And I think as I came out of the marriage, I went deeper into my relationship with God, and that sustained me. It really, really did. You know, there was times where, you know, we could have been lacking in things, you know, financially, you know, emotionally. I had to trust Him with my children, because they're all different ages, so they would have experienced different levels of the difficulties in a marriage. My daughter was the eldest; she would have pretty much seen everything, whereas the younger one, not so much. So I just, you know, I literally daily have to go before God and say, Lord, you need to hold them, you need to keep them, because at times I didn't necessarily have the strength to do that. But I would definitely say, just hold on to Him, both hands and feet, you know, because nothing's impossible, and you can keep going. You know, you can make it. Absolutely. It's not impossible to be on your own and not make it. God, so long as He's in the ship, you know, you can make it right the way through. But you have to trust Him.
Absolutely.
And we're running out of time.
Michelle?
I've got two questions, one to you. So I'll ask Michelle first.
Okay.
For those that have been married for a while, and you know there has been calluses that have formed on the heart, like you said, where you can feel that shutdown happening.
Yeah.
You said that you regret not trying. What advice, just look at the camera and say, what advice would you give to anybody that feels like they're almost on their way there, where they can feel their heart hardening and divorce is kind of maybe just popping up as a thought process at the moment, but they haven't really camped there yet? What would you say to that person?
I would say make sure that God is at the center of your relationship, and that you consult Him in every decision that you make. Don't make any decisions in haste. Seek God and seek His will for your life, because you never know. This may just be something that is developing your character. But yeah, I would say put God first in your relationship. If you feel that your heart is hardening, just spend time alone with Him. And I think that was one of the things that I didn't include. I didn't really include God in my relationship, which took me to a point where I was trying to do it all in my own strength, completely and 100% rely on God to see you through. Think about your children, if you have children. Think about the future. You know, there's a legacy that's being left, and you have to think long term and think about your grandchildren and what story or what legacy are you leaving behind? Are you leaving behind a trail of brokenness, or are you showing them that no matter what, God has got us, and we can fight through any situation? So if it's worth fighting for, fight for it.
And then you've done 45, coming up to 46 years in April. So, I mean, I'm sure you probably thought of leaving a few times. I've only done it for 9 or 10. So what would you say, what's the secret to stay in the course? Because I don't think that you've stayed the course because you've never had that thought. You've obviously chosen to stay, and I think that's what a lot of people don't realise. It's not like you get married and it's just wonderful. It's you have to fight for it. You have to work for it. So what do you want to share quickly before we end of 45 years?
We need a whole another hour to be able to do this. I think one of the things for me, number one is God. My go-to is always been God. I talk to God about Him. I wouldn't go to anyone else. It would be God, your son. I'd go. So I would always be like, if anyone I was complaining to, it'd be God. You know, I'd constantly have God as my go-to for conversations, and I think that's what saved me, because that opening and that access for Him to speak into me, even when I was going through challenging times. Everybody goes through it where, you know what, I want to quit. I'm done. This is your son, God. And the fact that He's God's son doesn't mean you're going to get this amazing man. Let me tell you, we're encased in flesh, and as long as you're married to someone, he's going to annoy the heck out of you. And there's times when you just like, I've had enough, and I just want to dream about the freedom you have of being single again. But one of the you do, we all get that. That's why it's good to go on girlfriend breaks, so that you can just go back to being a girl again. But one of the things that really that I govern my life with is what effect my decision has on everybody else. It's like a pebble. You can throw a stone into the water and you see ripples. And I know this is how I've managed my decisions. It's like, how's that going to affect everybody that's connected to me? How's it going to affect even people I don't know? But people that are watching my life, people that my decision, that for my own comfort, is going to impact them in a negative way. And it really is a sacrificial place, because it means I'm having to sacrifice what I want. I'm having to sacrifice what I'm going through right now, because I'm looking at the overall good of how this is going to impact on everybody else. And it's a massive place to get to. But if you can grow that in you, if you can grow that, and it doesn't mean being a doormat, and please don't get this all wrong. I'm by no means in a situation where I am, but it is a decision, because there is so much responsibility on my life, and I have to take that seriously. And whatever your relationship with if you've got children, etc., there is responsibilities hanging on you, and weigh your decisions in light of that. And we've run out of time.
So Danny, can you do a quick give your last thoughts of what you want to say?
So I just want to obviously encourage anybody, because obviously it's not like now this is every marriage is destined to fail. That's not the case at all.
That's not what we're saying.
That today was
this
really
conversation is to stop.
So it's a really I'm a firm believer in prevention. I think that you should put preventative measures in place through life in general with anything. And I think that this really is what this has been about. It's been a preventative conversation, but also to just be a conversation to encourage as well. So for those that may find themselves in that situation where they feel like, you know what, I've had enough, can't take anymore. Like I said, it takes two willing parties, and never underestimate the power of communication. A lot of the time,
the power of prayer.
Prayer and communication is two crucial things, because I think that a lot of the times we go through a marriage and we're both thinking things individually, and we presume what the other party's thinking. You know, speak to each other. You know, have those conversations, have those difficult conversations. I always say that it's better out.
Listen to learn.
Yeah, it's always better out than in. And don't, when your spouse comes to you, don't already formulate a response at all. Listen to hear rather than to respond. I'll say that again. Listen to hear rather than to respond, because whether you feel like it's valid or not, that person, it's their feelings, it's genuine, and you have to acknowledge that, and you have to care about that. So, you know, I hope that this has started a conversation. I hope that this is,
and I want everybody to know that there is life after divorce. God doesn't throw away the book because you didn't.
You don't lose your value.
You don't need to stop on chapter 2. God is writing your story, and we really wanted this conversation to happen because we don't feel like it happens enough in the body of Christ. So if that is your story, please know that God can still make something beautiful from your life. This will not define you. This is a snapshot in time, and allow God the permission to rewrite it. Last closing thought, Misha, quickly, 30 seconds.
If you're single, don't get married because you're lonely. That will not. Marriage doesn't solve it. Seek God and in all your decisions, and put Him first.
And listen.
And listen.
Last
And I would
closing
say to
thought.
married people, just conduct yourself as an extension of Christ, and see your partner as an extension
And learn
of
to
Christ.
pray.
And
Pray for your partner. Pray.
And don't let the sun go down on your wrath.
All right, we're out of time, guys.
Thank you
we will
guys
see
for
you
watching.
next week Thursday
Next
at
Thursday.
8:30.
Yes, for Girl
Talk.
Talk. See you next week.
Bye.